Hello, can I have your attention please? Can I have your attention? Yeah, property group, thank you for granting me, your audience, this fine lunch hour. For that I'm appreciative because I know how hard all of you do try to avoid me in the lunchroom. Well, I have you all now in the palm of my hand. Soundman, cue maniacal and or evil laughs now. Well, that was interesting. Now, you know what else is interesting? It's not a new car. Let's talk about the Queensland's new Shop Leases Amendment Act of 2016. It's just been rolled off the factory floor, and we're going to have a look at some of the new features and discuss how these changes affect the landlord's interests, and we'll also discuss the pros and cons and be able to better inform our clients, many of them, of course, being landlords. So, without further ado, Soundman, please. Now, what instigated these new amendments under what we'll now refer to as the Amending Act? The amendments that were put in place were to ensure a consistency with the retail acts of other states, mainly along the eastern coast of Australia. And one of the objectives that the amendments sought to address was the imbalance in negotiating power between lessors, which are usually the major shopping centres, and between smaller scale lessees. Now, this can therefore be seen in the amendments made to the meaning of what constitutes a retail lease, which now excludes all leases with a floor area greater than 1,000 square metres, and it also excludes the requirement that the lessee be a corporate entity. It excludes businesses that are run on the premises by a lessee but on behalf of the lessor, and further it clarifies and improves the efficiency of the current market rent determination process for tenants with 5 or more retail premises in Australia. But this leads me to question that if a tenant has upwards of 5 retail premises, perhaps they are not too under-resourced in terms of negotiating power. But I do digress. Now, what must our clients know? Given the limited time afforded to me for this talk, I will provide you with a few of the changes that I have cherry-picked that I feel are important for different stages of a lease in regards to landlords. As a side note, what I've found particularly important from this Amending Act is that it clarifies the operation of various definitions and provisions, which makes the advice that we provide much more clearer. It also provides reasonable required timeframes. As for the negotiation stage, now under the Amending Act, where landlords negotiate a lease agreement with a prospective tenant, but the prospective tenant ultimately does not proceed with the lease, but where the tenant has also instructed the landlord to prepare an agreement, the landlord can now recover lease preparation costs. Now, during the tenancy, the landlord will not be liable to pay compensation for a reasonable response to an emergency or by complying with a statute in some way. As for termination of contracts, the amendment provides that if a tenant terminates the lease due to the landlord's defective statement, the landlord may be liable to pay reasonable compensation for the loss or damage suffered because of that defective disclosure. As a recommendation, it is imperative that we advise landlords to make full disclosure. For example, if your client, being the landlord, failed to disclose to the tenant of structural works that may occur at no less than 12 months in advance, which occur during the tenant's lease term, the landlord will also be liable to pay compensation, and uncapped at that. As for options to renew, something that a landlord is to be wary of is there is also now a right for the tenant to withdraw its exercise of option notice within 14 days of receiving a renewal disclosure statement from the lessor. Put simply, the tenant can withdraw from the option whether or not the new option period is in effect. As a recommendation, we would advise landlords to issue a disclosure statement for renewal within the option exercise period, and if the tenant does end up withdrawing the option, the landlord may be better able to begin marketing the premises for lease and perhaps minimising the occupancy downtime of the premises. Now, in my final words, I will leave you all with something to ponder. The requirement for space need not be limited to physical space. Nowadays, space can also involve the virtual realms of the internet. So one may say that we are leaving the information age and moving into the experiential age. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Does the advent of virtual shopping centres, where the aisles, the products on the shelves are all computer generated, does this satiate subconsciously our primal survival needs, where we all become the brain plugged in and controlled by the corporate Cartesian skepticism demon posited by Descartes himself, but with a corporate spin? Where being plugged in, one can be bombarded with sounds, colours and images which are tailor-made to you in such a way that even one feels connected to the virtual assistant tour guide that somehow has all the features and nuances of the human female that you personally consider ideal. Such frontiers may be nothing more than an isolation tank where we are led to have our pleasure or fear centres manipulated in a way that you are induced as a consumer to make purchases so that one feels as though they are loved, more beautiful, or simply enough. Now, what does that tell us? Well, in this virtual reality that I've just proposed, from the consumer's point of view, we could say that it is less about the consumer's aim to spend money or amass a pyramid of useless physical things, but rather it is the experience that they pay for. From the lessee's point of view, it could be seen that they, the lessees, are the visionaries who are constantly creating new ways to ensnare the attention of those whose interests are piqued in this new virtual frontier. Now, one may see the virtual lessees in this new virtual space to be likened to what Suarez-Villa's musings in his book Technocapitalism, a critical perspective on technological innovation and corporatism, wherein he posited that in the future, human creativity will be commodified by the corporate interests in paving the way into the new frontiers of technology. Now, from a lessor's point of view, their role is nothing more than providing a blank plate leased out to the lessee so that the lessee may lay out their exotic dish to which the consumer may seek to experience, where the tenant is paid for the plate service and the landlord capitalises further by monetising all the virtual foot traffic of window shoppers and paying customers alike. So here we may find that the landlord's poaching the most creative tenants to instigate the commodification of the creativity. This would be akin to YouTube commodifying PewDiePie, a content creator who amasses upwards of 1.5 million views each video to only make content in YouTube and not BitChute or some other derivative. So it may never really be about the money, but more about the opportunity to entice the attention of others, an attention market, if you will. And money is but a byproduct of ensnaring that attention. So, is this a good thing or a bad thing? I ask again. For larger corporate interests, such as the lessors that you and I advise, to have the entirety of their shopping services and infrastructure online, and then to become overly regulated, to which consumers instead opt for peer-to-peer networks and cut out the techno-capitalist landlords altogether, something Suarez-Villa refers to as the act of decomposing the corporate interests. Even in this experiential world of never-ending instant gratification, the blinding lights that spur us on to make off-the-cuff purchases may be the same blinding lights that make for the unforeseeable obsolescence of virtual worlds through a rebellion of peer-to-peer networks in this new frontier. I thank you for your time today.